Coming up on Talking Points, the U.S.-Iran war continues with no near end in sight. How both sides are preparing to escalate the conflict.
Plus, the government shutdown is about to enter its second month. How this could impact your travel plans.
And multiple Illinois elections are taking place tomorrow. How that result could impact midterms. All that and more when Talking Points starts right now. Today marks the 17th day of the U.S. and Israel's war against Iran with no end in sight. Good evening and welcome into Talking Points. I'm Underwood.
And I'm Danielle Blyn. The U.S. is petitioning its allies for help, but with little luck, it seems. Talking Points analyst Megan Acker joins us in the studio with the most recent updates. Megan?
Yeah, Danielle, American senior officials have said since the start of the war with Iran that victory was all but inevitable. In fact, President Trump recently claimed it's already happened.
We've won. Let me say, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
But as the conflict continues with no ceasefire talks on the horizon, it appears that both sides are gearing up for an extended assault, and the death toll continues climbing. Nearly 1,500 Iranians have died, according to their health ministry. In Lebanon, almost 900 have been killed. At least 15 have died in Israel, and 13 American service members have been killed. It's worth noting that casualties are being reported throughout the Middle East, and that total is not all-encompassing. Now, as strikes continue, Iran doesn't appear to be weakening its grip on the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial shipping channel that 1/5 of the world's oil supply travels through. President Trump is insisting that other countries like China and Britain must pitch in to secure the shipping lane. Talks have been held with those countries' leaders, but little has been promised. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says that the U.S. military is also working to chip away at Iran's ability to attack vessels in the strait.
The only thing prohibiting transit in the straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that. Now, there's a reason why we chose as one of our primary objectives to destroy the Navy. We understood the ability to interdict shipping is something Iran has done for 40 years. It's key terrain. They've used it as leverage. The world is seeing what they'll do to fight back in that context.
Now, even those Americans who aren't really paying attention to the war overseas, well, they're noticing it when they're filling up their cars. So how have gas prices been affected by everything that's happened?
Well, to put it simply, they've soared, Riley. So back when President Trump gave his State of the Union address, he boasted that gas prices were around $2.30 a gallon across the nation. Now that number is up to just about $3.72 a gallon. So that expansion is huge. Now, on a global scale, we did see them shoot up to, I believe, about $120, and now they sort of just slid down a little bit, down to closer to $100 a barrel. But it's worth noting that that cost is not just borne on your car, right? It's not just what you're putting into the tank. It's also going to increase the cost of goods because we are not, a farm-to-table economy. We are a farm-to-truck-to-table economy. So that's going to increase the price of goods pretty much all across the country. It's worth noting that Strait of Hormuz, though, most of the oil that's coming through there is going to Asian economies. So that's causing a lot of tension there. So it's worth noting that that's kind of seems to be what's fueling Trump's sort of disregard for the whole issue. I mean, he posted on Truth Social very recently in a post saying that the United States is the largest oil producer in the world by far. So when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. But of far greater interest and importance to me as president is stopping an evil empire, Iran, from having nuclear weapons. So that sort of dismissal, it could end up hurting Republicans in the midterms that are coming up. I mean, we've seen people are not taking it well, but it seems like the fact that Asia is kind of bearing the brunt of this issue seems to be fueling that sort of attitude.
Now, Megan, if we go back to kind of the start of all this, one of the first airstrikes was on an Iranian girls' school that killed almost 200 people, and a lot of blame's been going back and forth. So who is responsible, and how did this even happen in the first place?
Well, Danielle, it's hard to know for certain, especially because it was so early in that initial assault. We know both sides have been trading blame. What we know for sure is that anonymously, there have been some reporting that in a preliminary report, the United States may be responsible. President Trump has had a couple different stances. He's blamed it potentially on Iran. He's then said he didn't really know. Hegseth and some other top military people are insisting that they're not going to say anything until the investigation is completed. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
And then what about the other nations? What happened at the latest United Nations Council meeting?
Yes, so there was an emergency Security Council meeting up with the United Nations. So that's not the entire UN. That's just 15 representatives that are on the Security Council. So UN Ambassador to the United States, Michael Waltz, made sort of an interesting claim, actually, while he was defending America's actions in Iran.
And his team, President Trump and his team, exhausted every attempt at diplomatic negotiations. He sought peace and to end 47 years of hostility and attacks, while Iran only sought more missiles, more drones, and a pathway to nuclear Armageddon. President Trump has drawn his red line here. Iran crossed it once again, and now the world is facing the consequences.
So it's worth noting, guys, that before, if we can rewind back to weeks ago now, there were talks on the table still when the U.S. and Israel first struck Iran. So it's unclear after those statements from Michael Waltz that whether or not that actually had been exhausted. But right now, the United Nations is moving to sanction Israel at this point.
Megan, thank you so much. Dutch police are investigating an explosion that damaged an office building in Amsterdam just days after a blast hit a Jewish school in the area. Police say the blast was claimed by the same extremist group that said it was behind the attack originally on the school. It is not clear if the building has a link to Amsterdam's Jewish community. Amsterdam mayor called the attack on the school a cowardly act of aggression toward the Jewish community. Last week in Belgium, a synagogue was rocked by an explosion that was also described as an anti-Semitic attack. These incidents appear to be part of a recent wave of anti-Semitic violence in Europe amid the ongoing conflict in Iran.
And here in the U.S., 2 attacks happened less than 700 miles away from each other. First, a deadly shooting identified as terrorism devastated a Virginia university, and later that day, a vehicle rammed into a targeted Michigan synagogue. The shooting at Virginia's Old Dominion University was committed by a veteran and convicted ISIS supporter. He killed 1 person and injured 2 others before a classroom of ROTC students killed him. Less than 2 hours later, a vehicle with explosive plowed into a synagogue, setting it ablaze while dozens of children were inside. The Michigan attacker was a Lebanese-born U.S. citizen who reportedly lost family members in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon. He was the only person who died in the attack.
An Afghan man who served alongside U.S. Special Forces and fled his native country after its takeover by the Taliban died this weekend. He died less than a day after he was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement outside of his Dallas area apartment. He had no known health conditions and had been seeking asylum since his arrival to the U.S. in 2021. DHS said he complained of shortness of breath and chest pains and was transplanted to a Dallas, Texas hospital. The initial report listed no cause of death. This marks the 12th death of a detainee in ICE custody this year.
Coming up on Talking Points, a federal judge is blocking Trump-imposed subpoenas against Jerome Powell. What this means for the central bank when we return.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
If you're buzzed and doing this, to make yourself feel okay to drive,
ZWX.
you're not okay to drive.
YGKLVW. Regular you.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Today, the Supreme Court announced it will decide whether President Donald Trump can end temporary deportations protections for hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals. The decision came in a pair of emergency appeals involving 6,000 Syrians and around 350,000 Haitians who have lived in the U.S. legally for years. The court deferred a request from the administration to remove protections for those people. Now it considers the bigger question of whether a president may end the temporary protections more broadly. That means the people at issue in the case will keep their legal protections for now.
And a federal judge has squashed subpoenas the Justice Department issued against Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The ruling is a major blow to President Donald Trump, who has repeatedly criticized Powell for not lowering interest rates. U.S. District Judge James Bousberg wrote in the new opinion that a, quote, mountain of evidence suggests that the government served these subpoenas on the board to pressure its chair into voting for lower interest rates or resigning. He added that the government has produced essentially zero evidence to suspect Chair Powell of a crime. Powell's term expires in May, and Trump has nominated former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh to take his place.
White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. In a Truth Social post, Donald Trump wrote that Wiles has an excellent prognosis and will continue to work virtually full-time at the White House. Trump did not specify how long Wiles is expected to receive treatment or any additional details about her diagnosis.
The Trump administration is planning to replace the White House Visitor Center screening with a brand new underground facility. The proposed facility would be a 7-lane, 33,000-foot visitor security center that would attempt to shorten lines and wait times. The new facility will be built at the site of the old East Wing that has been demolished for a planned ballroom. Both proposals will be discussed and voted on at the National Capitol Building Planning Commission in 2 weeks.
And after a few months of speculation, the Kennedy Center board today unanimously voted in favor to close the complex for 2 years for renovations. Earlier today, President Trump held a meeting in the White House urging the board to approve his plan. The board also voted today in favor of Matt Flocka to become the new CEO following the previous CEO's resignation. The center plans to officially close following July 4th celebrations. And unfortunately, spring break has ended here at Syracuse, but travel is still underway across the country despite an ongoing DHS shutdown. Here with updates on the partial shutdown amid new DHS leadership, is our analyst, Maya Davis.
Yeah, guys, a congressional deadlock over funding of the DHS has entered its second month after the Senate once again came to a standstill over providing for the agency. This means TSA, FEMA, the Coast Guard, and a federal cybersecurity office are continuing operations despite being without funding and leaving thousands of employees without paychecks. However, Border Control and Immigration Enforcement agencies are continuing to operate with additional funding approved separately by Republicans last year. Some of the immediate effects that we have seen include wait times at airports having surpassed 3 hours amid a peak travel period, and the halting of non-essential FEMA deployments. So far, the Democratic Party has remained united on their plan to stop funding for the agency until major restrictions on federal immigration officers are signed into legislation. Republicans are urging the passing of the bill in hopes of restoring the DHS into its full strength. As we await another voting on the bill, new leadership is underway at the DHS. President Trump has removed Kristi Noem from her position as Homeland Security Secretary after a much criticized appearance from Noem before Congress. Noem's replacement will be Republican Senator of Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin. Before becoming senator in 2023, Mullin served in the House for 10 years. Beginning March 31st, Mullen will serve as acting DHS secretary. He will hold that position while his nomination is pending in the Senate.
Yeah, Maya, so you mentioned that immigration enforcement agencies and Border Patrol have separate funding. Does this impact how the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services will operate?
So, in short, no, it won't affect because the UCIS is a fee-funded agency and does not rely on congressional appropriation. But we can expect indirect delays as there have been a shortage of staffing. So that means that things like E-Verify and background checks will slow down, but processes like the nationalization ceremony, processing, and interviews will still take place.
So what are the specific policy demands from Democrats that are creating the standoff?
So some of the major policy demands are to end the masking of officers and to end the random roundups of suspected undocumented immigrants. They are also asking to require body camera and warrants issued by a judge for arrest and home entry.
And immigration has been a major action point and talking point within the Trump administration. So how are Trump's approval ratings being impacted with everything going on surrounding immigration right now?
So Trump's disapproval ratings are at 55%. So voters are looking at how ICE agents are handling these roundups, and there's a lot of unrest, especially among citizens after 2 U.S. American citizens were shot and killed by ICE agents. So there's been a lot of disagreement among voters about the extent of the ICE agents.
Thank you so much. And Republican-led states are moving swiftly to implement new voting restrictions. How this could impact upcoming elections, coming up on Talking Points.
Women are bad with money.
It's what the world's been saying for centuries.
But now, we've got something to say. Save it. Save the old-fashioned advice, the empty excuses.
It's all worthless, unlike us.
To our fellow females, it is time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Contributing to our futures, investing in our independence. Until we're no longer
80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So again, we say to that, save it.
The falsehoods, the feelings of fault, then the funds.
Learn how to save for your retirement at wesaysaveit.org.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Cuba's electrical grid suffered a total collapse earlier today. This is the first blackout in the country since the U.S. shut off the flow of oil to Cuba. Cuban officials have held talks with the United States for the first time as the island faces an economic crisis and intense pressure from President Trump. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel says the purpose of these talks are to identify the bilateral problems that need a solution. Following the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Trump cut off Venezuelan oil shipments to Cuba. Last week, Trump said that Cuba is, quote, going to fall pretty soon and that the government really wants to make a deal. And earlier today, the New York Times reported that sources familiar with talks say the Trump administration wants to remove Diaz-Canel from power.
Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy is fighting for a bitter re-election without the support of President Donald Trump. Cassidy seemed aware of the political backlash he could receive when a year ago he challenged Robert F. Kennedy's skeptical views about vaccines. Now, as Cassidy seeks a third term, Kennedy's supporters haven't forgiven him for his doubts. He now wants to decide whether to confirm Kennedy's ally Casey Means to serve as Trump's Surgeon General. Cassidy faces off in a three-way primary against Representative Julia Letlow, who has the president's endorsement, and John Fleming, a state treasurer who has tried to establish himself as a conservative alternative in the race. The primary is scheduled for May 16th. And the Senate is set to consider President Trump's sweeping Save America Act next week.
President Trump has said he won't sign another piece of legislation until the bill is voted on. However, many GOP senators say they simply don't have the votes. Our Boone Kilpatrick is here in studio to break it down. Boone?
Yeah, guys, it's a major wrench being thrown into these upcoming midterm elections. 35 seats are up for grabs, 20 of them are Republican holdings. And with the president's popularity flagging, many pundits predict a coming blue wave that could flip the Senate and the House majority. The president's bill would require those registering to vote to present proof of citizenship with a passport or a birth certificate, both of which many Americans don't possess or don't have easy access to. Many experts have said that the bill would largely disenfranchise Republican voters, as Republican voters are much less likely to have a passport and are likely to live further away from a registration point under the new rules. The bill does not have the necessary support in the Senate. Majority Leader John Thune had this to say regarding the bill.
I mean, I think you have a lot of optimists out there, and I appreciate that, and a lot of passion and energy behind getting an outcome here, but getting an outcome would require Democrat votes.
Now, Democrat support is just something the SAVE Act does not have. It fell on a party line vote in the House. Now, however, despite the holdup in Washington, many states have already gone ahead with state laws that mirror the SAVE Act's policies. Utah and South Dakota both pushed through laws that require proof of citizenship. Both laws are waiting on governor's signatures. And another citizenship voting law in Florida was passed through on Thursday. And even in blue states like California, proof of citizenship laws have been added to November's ballot as referendum measures. President Trump spoke to Republican lawmakers and doubled down on his stance and why the bill was so important.
Nobody is doing what we're doing, and there's no elections so corrupt as the elections in the United States of America, and we can solve them with this.
Now, Boone, what are the impacts of these new state laws, and who will be most affected by this?
Well, it's like I said, I mean, Republican voters are largely the people that will be most affected by this. Republican voters on average are much less likely to have a passport than Democrat voters. And they're far more likely to live in rural areas, which are farther away from these registration points. So Donald Trump has made the claim that by passing this law, it would almost guarantee the midterms. It would make it easier for Republican voters to get to the polls, and it would eliminate this fraud that he's been talking about in American elections. But the truth of the matter is, the people who don't have these things they need to register are mostly Republican voters. And there's a lot of concern here from the Trump base around a lot of these elections. This really does not look like it's going to end well for the Republicans come the midterms. There's a number of really key elections up for grabs right now. I mean, Maine, you have the only Republican senator in all of New England up there. She's under a real pressure challenge. You got a couple of special elections down in Florida and in Ohio where J.D. Vance vacated his seat. So there's a lot of different Senate seats that might traditionally go red or have a red defense that are looking really shaky. Texas, that's another one. James Tallarico recently won the Democratic primary there. He's looking like he could make a real challenge and turn a Texas Senate seat blue. So there's a lot of pressure here from Trump to make sure that this goes his way, do everything he can, fight, claw, scratch, and that's been his rhetoric, even though it really won't do much for Republican voters.
Now, Boone, there's also a race in Illinois that we were talking about, but what makes this race so critical for Democrats right now?
Well, you're absolutely right, Danielle. Tomorrow night, the Democratic primary for the Illinois Senate seat. That's a really tight race. Now, it's probably going to go blue in the in the general election, but it's more who's leaving that's so important. Dick Durbin, major Democratic whip in the Senate, and he's also been very vocal against this bill and against these claims of fraud by President Trump. And right now, it's not so much about who's in the race itself. It's more about who's endorsing. J.B. Pritzker, who's looking to make a presidential run probably in 2028, he has already endorsed his lieutenant governor for that spot. So it's not looking like it'll go the Republicans' way in the general election, but if you have enough infighting, you have enough bickering in there, it could maybe cause a presidential endorsement here in Illinois, maybe try to grab a seat back.
You mentioned a guy from Texas earlier, James Tallarico. Who is he, and why is he so important? Why is he so important in this race?
James Tallarico is a very, special candidate. I don't think we've seen a candidate like this in modern times. He's a seminarian. He's a preacher. He's gone to seminary school. He's applying a lot of Bible rhetoric to a lot of blue ideas, right? To these social services. He's pro-life. It's a very rare thing that we've seen, and he's starting to steal away a lot of these midline Republican voters in Texas. I think there's a really big sense in Texas that, the Republican's going to win anyway, so why do I vote as a Democrat? And that leads to a lot of these very moderate Republicans who just kind of turn out and do their due diligence and vote, but they don't really feel too strongly to go to the other side. But this is someone who really gets after it and gets after these specific voters. There was a record number of Democratic voters out in the primary. He could really put up a challenge there.
Thanks so much, Boone. Well, after the break, the head of the FCC is under fire for his threats against TV stations' coverage of Iran. How critics are responding when we return.
Hi, my name is Sadie Miller.
My name is Luke Brady. I go by St. Luke.
So this one I started with this guitar lick.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
Welcome back to the Talking Points. Well, the head of the FCC, Brandon Carr, has been getting a lot of attention this weekend for threatening the licenses of local broadcasters over news coverage he deemed fake. Now Carr has very little power to follow through. Television stations are not at serious risk of being banned from the airwaves because of his statement. The FCC has not denied a license renewal in any decades. And government action against the station would case a legal battle and likely mount a First Amendment case.
However, his comments still carry weight since Carr represents the U.S. government and advances President Trump's policy agenda. Critics are calling Carr's threat authoritarian and unconstitutional. Trump has repeatedly confused the licensing process while attacking national news networks for airing certain shows and asking him particular questions. Now, I think this is a really interesting conversation. We saw a lot of this a few months ago with late night television,
right,
but this is now going after more cable news, and it's a very different story there.
And I think we really haven't seen this before in any other administration. Even the first Trump administration, we heard that's fake news, but there were no real actions behind it. Now, the head of the FCC making threats about not renewing contracts, it all just seems so new.
Yeah, I think the big thing to look at here is cable news has an equal time policy. They are required to give equal time to both sides of parties, both parties when they talk about things. So really they're not doing anything wrong, even if they're asking questions that the president and his administration might deem unconstitutional. If they're giving equal time, they are allowed to ask those questions and do as they please there.
Right. We heard that with the late night and even with the regular news shows. Now, it seems like these might be a lot of threats, and President Trump even accused a lot of them of not wanting America to win the war because of the coverage that he said was biased and a little bit of colluded. But it seems like there just doesn't seem like anything they can actually do.
Yeah, like we mentioned, it's hard to get these licenses taken away from you, especially some of these stations that have had them for hundreds of years since television was around for the first time and got these things. So I don't think anything's really going to come up here.
Well, that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News and like us on Facebook. I'm Riley Underwood.
And I'm Danielle Blyn. Have a great night, Syracuse.